Hello everybody, I am in the city of Cleveland in Ohio today. Behind me is Severance Hall, the home of the Cleveland Orchestra, and sitting right next to me is Brett Mitchell, the assistant conductor, now associate conductor of the Cleveland Orchestra. And Brett, you've just been to China, taking the Cleveland Orchestra, youth orchestra with you to have a tour of 4 cities. Beijing and Shanghai I saw as the ones that came to mind. I knew, and Ningbo I knew as well. Tell us, how was it?
It was great. No, it was great. It was, you know, I have to say, it was a really fantastic opportunity because I had been to Asia once before. I went to Tokyo about 5 years ago, just for a personal trip for pleasure. But that's the only place that I had ever been in Asia. And so when I was brought on board here to be the assistant conductor of the Cleveland Orchestra and the music director of the Cleveland Orchestra Youth Orchestra, now a little over 2 years ago, they told me, they said, in the summer of 2015, we're going to take an international tour. Where do you want to go?
No.
And I said, oh my gosh. So yeah, which was great. And so what we ended up doing was we worked with this tour company and they put together 3 proposals for us of various different places that we could go. And we ended up zeroing in on China, which was just, you know, for a lot of reasons it made the most sense. We have, of course, a very large contingent of young Chinese musicians in our orchestra, and a lot of them are either from China themselves or their parents were from China. So lots of personal connections there.
Strong ties to China, definitely.
Absolutely. And so so once we got over there, it was, I have to say, it was very helpful because I found myself in a couple of situations where I was with some of our young musicians who are fluent in both English and Chinese, and boy was I glad that they were with me.
You need a little help there.
Well, it was, you know, because we would go from hall to hall, and I would want to go out into the hall during rehearsal to check for balance while one of our young players took over my conducting duties. And I was trying to go, it was actually in Ningbo, I was trying to go out into the hall to listen, and this usher, she was absolutely adamant that I was not going out into the hall. And so I had to have one of the young musicians, because I was wearing jeans, you know, and I had to have one of the young musicians tell her, no, he's the conductor. He needs to go out to the hall. So, but it was great. I mean, to experience such a different culture is so important. And I think that for these kids, these fabulous young musicians, I'm 36 years old. We have kids in the orchestra as young as 12 years old. And so I'm literally 3 times their age. And so for them to have had the experience of going to China at 12 years old and experiencing a totally different culture, how open their worlds will be. I think it was just an extraordinary experience all around.
Wonderful, that's excellent. Now, how did you feel the audience reacted to you whilst you were out there? Because I found that kind of remarkable when I just toured it. What did you think? It was great.
No, it was great. And I told the young musicians, I said, you know, none of us, I shouldn't say none of us, some of them had played concerts in China before, but the vast majority of us had not played concerts there, and you don't know what to expect. And we were bringing some familiar repertoire, which is very important on the road. We played Tchaikovsky's 4th Symphony. It doesn't get much more familiar than that. And the Shostakovich Festive Overture. But we also played a couple of more recent pieces. We played a piece for string orchestra by a Polish composer named Wojciech Kilar, a great piece called Orava, and then a piece by We Are a Young American Orchestra. So we played a piece by Samuel Barber called Medea's Dance of Vengeance. And so I said, you know, I don't know what the reaction will be from the audiences. Maybe they'll go crazy, maybe they won't go crazy at all. And what it turned out was that certainly by the end of all of the concerts, we absolutely had all of the audiences, but we kind of got them at different points in each performance. You know, certainly by the end of the Tchaikovsky, everybody was out of their seats. But in various cities, you know, the Barber played great in some cities and not so well in other cities, just because it's so far outside of their norm. I will say this though, and this is a great credit to the Cleveland Orchestra's Director of Artistic Planning, Mark Williams, who used to work for the San Francisco Symphony before he came here. I'm also from the West Coast. I'm from Seattle originally, and so there's a lot bigger Asian population out there. San Francisco Symphony was doing Chinese New Year's concerts, things like that when Mark was
yes.
there. And he said,
Yeah.
I'll tell you what you need to do on this tour. After you play the programs, you have to find an encore of some kind of traditional Chinese folk song. And so we found this great song called the Flower Drum Song from Fungyang that was arranged by a Chinese-American composer.
I see.
And you know, it was funny because in our first performance in Beijing, it was funny. It was not the greatest hall that we played in, and the audience was kind of standoffish. Even after the Tchaikovsky, and I was like, I don't know what's going on here. And we played the encore, and it begins with 5 bars of kind of chaos, and then the folk song starts. And the second that folk song started, the whole audience was all a Twitter behind us. It was great, and they just, you know, it was funny because I could hear them, but the looks on the kids' faces when they could see the audience reacting.
Yeah.
I was hearing stories about, you know, the older members of the audience singing along to the younger members of the audience, and certainly by the end of the programs, everybody was on board, and it was great.
Oh,
it was really great. It was awesome.
Yeah. Excellent. And how was your overall impression of traveling to China? It's a far trip from Cleveland. It's a 12-hour time difference, of course. How did you weather the culture itself? The different food, the air, everything?
Yeah, it was, you know, it was funny because I think I traveled to Europe quite a lot. As I mentioned, my father is from London originally, so I've been going there for a long time. I go to Europe all the time with the Cleveland Orchestra because we do an annual tour of the Cleveland, of Europe rather. And so I was expecting, because I had only been to Tokyo the one time, I was expecting to be kind of totally out of it for a while.
In the fog, in that jet lag fog world, yes.
But it turns out that it's something about it being on the total opposite end of the planet just forces you to kind of realign yourself. And I will say this though. This was interesting.
Yeah.
Our first full day in China, so we got in at whatever time it was in the afternoon. We all stayed awake, had the welcome dinner. But then the next day, the first full day in China, what did they have us do? They had us go climb the Great Wall.
And that's steep.
So,
that is steep,
it is
isn't it?
not
Those
a joke.
stairs are knee-high.
I know. Well, it was funny because my parents had been to China before, and they went to one of the more how do you say this, comfortable sections of the Great Wall, and so I was expecting a nice little hike up, and sure enough, and it was funny because I had all the orchestra kids with me, and they were all cheering me on. They were saying, "Mr. Mitchell, you're doing great," and I turned around to them and I said, "Yeah, you know, you're 18 years old. You don't have anything to prove. I'm 36. I got a lot to prove in front of you people." And I tell you what, if those 100 kids hadn't been there, I would have looked up at that Great Wall and said, "There it is. That's good. Beautiful. Great Wall of China. Fantastic. I've been." But no, I hiked all the way up to the top of it with all of them. It was great.
Let me ask you, would you do it again? Would you pick, if you had another choice of any international location, would you pick China again? Would you like to try something different? What do you see in the future?
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, I loved China. I thought it was fantastic, but part of the joy for me in doing what both you and I do is exploring different cultures and getting to know different people and playing for different audiences and experiencing different parts of the world. Not that I worked for the French National Orchestra for 3.5 years. I was their assistant conductor, and I traveled back and forth between originally Chicago and Paris, where I was living, and then Houston and Paris. And it's not that I don't love Paris, because I adore Paris. Everybody loves Paris. But there's something about going somewhere new that's so wonderful. So whoever the next music director of the Cleveland Orchestra Youth Orchestra is, whenever they tour again, my hope is that they will do something different, which I should point out is why we went to China in the first place, because when they asked me, when I first came on board, where would you like to go? My answer was, not where you just went. Their first international tour had been to Europe. And I didn't want to replicate that experience. You've done that. Do something different, especially because for these young people, a lot of them have been on that Europe tour.
They stay in
so
the
let's
orchestra.
do something different.
Oh, that's good strategy. Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming and talking with us.